Today, I invite you to look over my shoulder when I orchestrate the sketch that came out of the interval matrices. If you want to check out more about interval matrices, how they work, how you can use them in your own compositions, I did a full session on that, which is available inside my community, the Circle of Interval Magicians. The link is also down in the description box. So if we haven't met before, I'm Frank. I'm an interval composer. I've studied the intervals for over 2 decades now, and I'm at a point where I can confidently teach these things to other composers. That's what I do inside the community. But now let's jump into the creation video of the orchestration. So here we are looking at the sketch again. Let's quickly listen to it. Okay, so that's all nice so far, but I feel that we need to find a better way to move into this motif. So that's why I'm now writing a short introduction into the sketch, also based on the 3+8 and 1+4. So I'm using these structures now vertically. And this also helps to set the tone and the overall mood. So let's listen to that idea. So the plain repetition here doesn't seem to work, so let's move things around maybe just a little bit. And you can see I'm transposing it. Well, actually I'm replacing it to the 1+4. In fact, it's a 1+3. Now, so to avoid any confusion, the thing here in bar number 3, which reads 1+4, in fact, that is a 1+3. So the E flat goes to the natural E, that's the 1. And then from the E to the G, that's the 3. So yeah, these little mistakes, unfortunately, they happen when you are in the flow and just move along with your ideas. So let's listen to that first orchestration. The horn actually works very nicely in that register. And now we need something against it. So I'm using the strings section to take care of harmony. And I remember that this downward slide or glissando, this was really something I struggled with for some time here. Because the sound, it kept changing and I was not really happy with how it sounded. So that's why you're seeing me change this pretty often and move things around. This was just because I wanted to hear something different. I like the overall idea, but as you can tell by watching this, I'm still not happy with how it sounds. So let's listen to this as a variation. Yeah, it's not bad. But I think I will come back to this and keep changing things, but for the sake of moving forward, I'm now tackling the lower part, and that is the cellos and the basses. And they will play stuff in octaves. So I just want to have something against the higher strings. And for the lower parts, you can really just go with any notes as long as they don't create a 13 or a doubled note necessarily. However, when you step on a doubled note in octaves, then make sure you do this purposely. Because I saw I doubled the C note that also happened in the first violins. Yeah, so I also remember that I will change the oboe or the English horn. Probably I will change it. I'm not quite sure though, although I like the sound. It's actually a nice contrast to hear everything come from the woodwind section now, which is the melody and also harmony. And you can tell I'm moving things around. So I now have the bassoon and the clarinet. I think in bar number 12, I will probably add a slur. Yep, right there. So that idea is now complete in the woodwind section, which also means we can do something else in the other sections. So let's see if we can find a better transition into the next part. And that's the moment where I again come back to the sketch and now use with those sketch tones again to keep the orchestral sections going. So let's see what we can do in the strings, in the higher strings. And I think I want to create something that has a pad character. So just nice and smooth and ongoing, because the woodwind section has a lot of movement and I don't want to compete with that. So you're seeing that I'm actually simplifying my parts in the strings, and I want to reduce the movement to a minimal amount so that the focus stays on the woodwind section, because the strings are meant to be just a second layer, so to speak, but in the background. Okay, so that's not bad. However, the register is pretty much the same. So I think that later in the process I will move the strings into a higher register. But let's see, now the cellos. So I want to bring back the whole strings section for that rest point. So that now plays with the energy of the various orchestral sections. It's interesting because it actually sounds like a chord progression. However, it's not. It's not based on any chords. And that usually happens when you base things on the harmonic series and just look for the harmonics or the upper partials that are missing between your melody and your bass. Because the brass section was a bit quiet, let's bring them back. And let's also add something to the strings. And the flute really adds a nice character to the violins. So I like this combination a lot, because it adds this airiness or air on top of the violins. Okay, and now let's tackle the rest of the woodwind section because we want them to do something as well. And that is now your good old friend counterpoint. Now I'm not quite happy with those notes, but I do like the rhythm. So that is why you are seeing me now fiddling with those notes a bit more. And I think we need to repeat that rhythm. Because the rhythm in the melody also repeats, so I'm pretty sure we will hear that little counterpoint motif again with other notes. But first I'm filling in the cellos. So you wanna make each line feel complete in a way. That is always a guarantee for a good part later and a logical part as well. So again, this is a counterpoint thing in the cellos. And again, I'm not thinking of chords here. This is just line writing. It definitely feels a little bit thin at around the end, but we have not tackled the final chord. There is a bit more bottom end already, that's good. And here it comes. Now, that is the repetition of this little counterpoint idea that we started in the woodwinds. And I'm very sure we will hear it in the woodwinds as well. So first I'm figuring out the notes. And there we go. So let's hear this idea. And we have to decide about how much dissonance we want to hear. There is something in there against the flutes. Yep. Now that is more consonant. That is why you want to actually listen to the sections on their own as well. So make sure that the strings sound complete and good on their own. And that's also true for the woodwinds and the brass, obviously. So now I'm just filling in the final bars. Again, trying to make each line sound as complete as possible. Totally love those chromatic connections into the final bar. That's always a great thing. So this is the result that I got after almost an hour now, an hour of working on this orchestration. So you can see the timer in the upper left corner. Again, some more chromatic connections here, and let's listen to the strings. And you also realize I'm not putting in any dynamic markings. I do this later. So first I want to figure out the actual notes, and then I tackle every instrument with the graphical MIDI tools and go into the programming, so all the velocities. But actually Note Performer on its own gives a very nice interpretation of the notes already. So I think this is actually quite good. See, that's the balance, what I just referred to. And that all came out of the 3-part sketch. Okay, so now I think it is time for some more decoration and fine-tunings. So I think now I will come back to the strings section and the register that I mentioned earlier in the video. But first, a little bit of molto ritardando can't hurt at around the end. So I think we are pretty close already, but as I said, now let's add a little bit of decoration. So I want to highlight the horn line a bit with the Glockenspiel. So this gives a bit more brightness to the horns. And now the vibraphone. Also totally love this, especially in combination with the Glockenspiel. So let's listen to that. So I think also this has to repeat, but with other tones. So I'm transposing this, make it work. Open it up a bit more. And now I'm tackling the strings again. Okay, so here I think that the Glockenspiel can actually jump in between some of the notes. Why not? And now I have a feeling that the strings, especially the first violins, yes, they start bothering me. So now they are not playing in the same register as the English horn anymore, which I think is a better choice. And now let's also add a bit of brass. So adding these additional bars in the brass section definitely helps blur the lines a little bit. And that is always good. So you know the pattern that I started with, but now I'm trying to blend the pattern into this fluent story. And therefore, let's also add the other instruments here. And now this should be pretty final, I think. So let's do some final adjustments and then we can listen to the final version, at least without the graphical MIDI tools programming. So that will be an additional step that I don't show in the video here. But for now, let's listen to at least the final orchestration. So that's roughly 1.5 hours. I hope you like it.